Hello, everyone. Welcome to the roundtable discussion on the emergence of enterprise automation. I'm your host for today. My name is Anish Nath, Practice Director at Everest Group, focusing on research and advisory covering intelligent automation products and services globally. Joining me today as panelists, are an esteemed group of industry leaders. I would request them to introduce themselves, starting with Sonal Chaturvedi.
Hello. Hello, everyone. I'm Sonal Chaturvedi. I'm a Vice President and Product Head for Enterprise Automation Fabric at Capgemini, focusing on the development, evolution, and adoption of the enterprise platform across our clients. Good to be on the call.
Great. Eric Fedet.
Good afternoon. So I'm Eric. I'm the Chief Technical Officer for CIS, which is Cloud and Infrastructure, and one of the friendly stakeholders with Sonal on that initiative.
Great. Jerome Thomas.
So I'm Jerome Thomas, Vice President, Head of the Global EDM Office. Basically, I look after industrialization, automation, innovation, and more recently, generative AI within our service delivery. And I work closely with Eric and Sonal on all this.
Great. Next up is Gary James.
Hi there. Yes, Gary James. I'm head of offer for Europe for our ADM services. So really looking at how enterprise automation, everything from what used to be, enterprise automation through to now with generative AI, how that can help us to deliver our ADM services out to customers.
Great. Steed Emepagnan.
Yes, my name is Steed. I work for Eric Friday here, and I'm one of the lead architects for automation on Eric's team.
Great. And last but not the least, Vaibhav Bansal.
Hi, everyone. I'm Vaibhav Bansal. I'm working as a Vice President with Everest Group, part of the business process services. As a part of my role, I'm co-leading this practice called Service Optimization Technologies, where we cover everything to do with intelligent automation and AI, both from a product and services standpoint. Excited to be on this conversation. Thank you.
Okay, great. So thank you, everyone, for gracing the stage today. So before delving deep into the emerging topic of enterprise automation, which is a combination of business process and IT automation, wanted to understand from Vaibhav, what is the current scenario of automation initiatives in the market?
Yeah, sure, Anish. So again, if we look at the history of automation, especially in the last decade or so, so it has played a great role in transformation of business processes. So initially, it started from like a rule-based automation, but today what we see is an AI-based ecosystem of intelligent automation. Again, over this entire period, automation has manifested itself in two primary ways. One is the business process automation, which, as the name suggests, is about automation of business processes and functions, like F&A and procurement, HR, or the industry-specific processes. So that's one, and you see some data here. Like the overall intelligent automation or automation market size today globally is close to $50 billion. Out of which 15% is this first category of business process automation, which I talked about. The other way, the second way, in which automation has manifested itself over this entire period is IT automation, which is actually a big part of this entire bucket. And when I say IT automation, it means automation of all sort of IT tasks, associated with whether it's app development or infrastructure. So that's actually a huge chunk of the market, as you can see here, 82%. Again, while automation has manifested itself in these two ways, but there has been significant overlap in terms of the underlying technologies getting used. For example, RPA and low code, even workflow or automation or process orchestration. So it's not that the technologies were completely isolated, but at least the way these two were thought of, they were in silos. However, in the recent past, now what we're seeing is coming together of these two forms of automation, and that is where we are coining this term enterprise automation, which, as you see, is a very small portion of the market today, about 3%. But again, the growth rate expected for enterprise automation is actually very large as compared to other forms of automation. Yeah, so that's the current scenario. If we talk about the overall automation market, what you see here is split by industry and geography. So typically, and this is largely true across all forms of automation. So sectors like banking and insurance, telecom, CPG, healthcare, these are among the top industries, and they have been there for quite some time, largely due to greater demand for automation or early adoption in these industries. Uh, Similarly, when you talk about geography, North America dominates by a margin. It has always been one of the early adopters of any technology, followed by Europe and Asia Pacific, where now I think a lot of enterprises are warming up to the concept of automation and realizing its benefits. So that's the industry and geo spread. And as I said, enterprise automation is going to really accelerate in the next couple of years. So the market size today, which you see, it could just double or triple in the next few years. Now, one interesting part which happened last year is around this entire push for AI and further driven through generative AI. So last year the situation was like everybody was excited for AI. Like you talk about an AI project and you'll likely get an approval for that very easily. Now, what generative AI, I think so. Generative AI is actually going to be a trigger for enterprise automation because you see, it makes sense to use generative AI universally for all these kinds of automation. So that's where I see an acceleration coming, and generative AI acting as a trigger. Yeah, Anish. So that was my initial thought around the current state of automation and how enterprise automation is going to flow from here.
Great, great. So it's interesting to see. I mean, the siloed forms of automation, they seem to be predominant in the market, right? But do you see any challenges with this particular approach, like the siloed approach toward automation?
Yeah, of course. I mean, there have been a lot of challenges, and in fact, that's the reason why this concept of enterprise automation is now emerging. I can talk about a couple of them, which probably are the topmost on my mind. So the first one, which I can think of, is organizational silos, right? So and that's where the siloed automation was getting adopted more. So traditionally, it's to do with the way enterprises are structured, right? So it's mostly a federated structure, where individual divisions or lines of businesses have their own responsibilities. They have their own, sales units and cost centers. Even their adoption of automation is siloed in that sense. They are thinking about their immediate benefits within their divisions, and even within that, there is no like terminal responsibility of what is happening or what are the outcomes. So that's one form of silo. Secondly, from a business process and IT standpoint, also there are silos, right? Because the CIO and the COO organizations are typically siloed, right? So they are not very interconnected, and that has been the case for very long. So these are like a couple of reasons why I see enterprises are siloed, and their approach to adoption of automation is also siloed logically. So that's the first one. The second, I think, challenge which comes to mind after organization silos is about a bit about cost, right? So historically, the total cost of ownership has been really important. When I say total cost of ownership, it includes the end-to-end cost, right? From when you think about acquiring automation technologies to using them, implementing them, even operating and maintaining them. So again, when you take a siloed approach, the cost is going to be always higher because there are many things which you are doing repeatedly or which you are doing where you're duplicating effort. So you don't get those economies of scale because you're doing it in your own division, and also you're not integrating business process and IT. So from that standpoint, total cost of ownership has always been higher in case of siloed automation, which is actually pushing organizations to think about enterprise automation. Yeah, so those are the top ones for me, Anish.
Okay, great. And I think cost is one of the major challenges in many of these technologies, right? It's a great point that you brought up there. I'll turn to Sonal now. Sonal, are there any additional challenges that you encounter as part of your client engagements?
Yeah, I think many a times, again, beyond what Weber very succinctly summarized earlier, uh, a challenge which we see is in terms of the final value delivery which the overall enterprise automation program is able to provide. So that's an area where we see the two parts to it. One is there genuinely value and how where it's coming out, and second is ability to measure it. So it's not that there is no value, but many a times what you find is it's not exactly focused upon the value which comes out of it. Again, uh, in terms of the target which people pick up for automation, it's not always that it's a holistic setup which is looked upon. And that's something which probably doesn't deliver the overall potential of automation which is possible if a broader picture was seen, if a longer term horizon is looked at it, and rather than automating what is as is, I think a more longer term view is taken. I think that could definitely add more value to the overall automation process.
Great. Great. So now that we understand the challenges in the siloed approach, right, it will be good to understand some of the driving forces behind the rise of enterprise automation. So, I have a question to you. What do you think are the major drivers of change to enterprise automation?
Yeah, no, that's that. And again, the drivers actually, come from some of these challenges as well. So I have talked about, silos earlier in the challenges. Now, while that is true for majority of the enterprises, what is now happening, at least with some percentage of enterprises, is they are thinking about internal changes, right? So that's the first driver for me, right? So organizations are thinking about having common centers of excellence or COEs when it comes to business process and IT automation. I mean, earlier also there were COEs which have been in place, largely catering to just one type of automation, but now they are converging. Even the CIOs and the COs, silos are breaking down. There are many enterprises we talk to who have now, bridged this gap, and they have formed either COEs or common steering teams who are driving some of these, automation initiatives and driving this outcome-based or value, centric thinking, which Sonal was also talking about. The second key aspect, or key driver, which I can think of is again something to do with the providers, right? So today, when you think about an enterprise or the IT estate of an enterprise, it's really messy. There are so many providers, like even dozens, or in certain cases, it could be actually hundred of providers, right? Who are working in different divisions or different parts of the organization, even solving for similar problems. For example, even for business process automation and IT automation, it's very likely the organization is taking services of different providers. So while all that was happening over these years, now I think we see a lot of enterprises thinking about consolidation in terms of providers, and more inclination towards a platform-based approach, which something like enterprise automation can really help drive by having that common data layer and building automation and industry-specific or function-specific use cases on top of that. So those are like the top two drivers, for me, for enterprise automation.
Sure, sure. Thank you, Vaibhav. So indeed, some strong drivers that we see toward the push of enterprise automation. Now, Sonal, I'll turn to you. Beyond the factors which Vaibhav mentioned, what do you see as some of the other driving forces?
Again, as a provider, what we see is the customer expectations from automation are changing significantly. The focus of automation is probably, and again, I'm not saying it's right now, for some time now, the focus had gone away significantly from the cost saving and all to the value, which the outcomes which come out of it. It's no longer just I would say an arbitrage stream, but it becomes a competitive edge for an organization which is able to drive it well. And that is to address those customer expectations and customers who really expect things to be done end to end in a straight through manner without having to go through multiple handoffs. So that evolving customer expectation is driving some of the decisions as we see. being taken from an enterprise automation perspective. Apart from that, fulfilling the end customer requirement obviously is the top priority, but internally within the organization, again, a clear visibility of what are the return of investment is very critical when people put money. For a long time, and again, it's in the cycle of any technology, you see people invest money for POCs, trials, improvements, but automation now is at a mature level where people want to see that, okay, now we have a steady view of where we are heading. Do we have a clear measurement of return on investment? So that's something which is an important part, which is driving many of the decisions being taken, approach which are being taken. And finally, I think as I think the image which Vaibhav earlier showed, AI has been replaced by Gen AI. So today, every initiative we talk about, it needs to have some sort of a Gen AI flavor. Now, obviously, this is something which promises a lot, and we see a lot happening in this area. But yeah, generative AI definitely, as you've seen in the last few quarters, has a potentially to significantly change the way a lot of things are being done. And the coming few quarters, we ourselves see that our overall enterprise automation strategy will be impacted because of the adoption of new things which we are doing from generative AI perspective.
Great. Indeed, I mean, generative AI has been the buzzword for quite some time, and I think it's likely to be so in some of the upcoming months as well. So now that we know what the drivers are, let's define and understand what an enterprise automation solution is. So a question to you, Vaibhav, what are some of the key characteristics of an enterprise automation solution?
Yeah, so when I think about an enterprise automation solution, and some of the most important objectives which come to my mind are enabling end-to-end observability or visibility, and probably having like a completely frictionless enterprise. So those are, I would say, the underlying objectives. Now, to enable these, some of the key characteristics which I can think of are firstly, in terms of KPIs or metrics, right? So they need to be interrelated because traditionally business used to have their own KPIs, IT used to have their own KPIs, and there is a point after which they don't talk to each other. I'll take an example. For example, you talk about a process which deals with claims, claims processing. Now, the ultimate business objective or business KPI could be minimizing the duration, which it takes to process a claim, or basically increasing the claim throughput. Right now, that's the business KPI. Now, again, traditionally we'll stop there, right? Now it's also a function. This throughput is also a function of how good your infrastructure is, or the health of the infrastructure is, which is more of an IT KPI. But again, if we have an enterprise automation system where these KPIs talk to each other or where they are interrelated, I think it's very easy to ensure the right business outcomes or not having suboptimal outcomes. So that's the first one. A related one would be, having integrated data and analytics. Again, this is again to enable end-to-end visibility. And when I talk about analytics, it's the entire analytics, right from diagnostic to descriptive to predictive and so on. So if there is an interrelation between business and IT processes, I think it will be very easy, or relatively easy at least, to predict some of the future events or outages or adverse impacts on some of the business as well as IT KPIs. So yeah, those are the two top ones. A few others, which I can think of is having a centralized control, which will again come if we have IT and business systems talking to each other. And last but not the least, ultimately the objective of all of this in the longer term would be to enable, an autonomous system, or what we call as, a self-healing system. So the problem traditionally has been, there isn't an end-to-end visibility. So even if you want to enable autonomous actions, that is not possible. But now with enterprise automation, that could actually become a reality. So yeah, so that's the other one, and probably the most important one.
Great way to basically describe it. Now, to make things real, I'll ask this question to Sonal. So, how is an enterprise automation solution different from the prevalent automation solutions in the market? And again, to make things real, what are some of the differentiating features or characteristics of enterprise automation fabric?
Okay, let me pick up from where Webhub initially during the introduction explained from the enterprise automation perspective. So one of the things which I think maybe 3-4 years back, which was very common, was you had a lot of localized automation solutions. Different teams within an organization went with their own choice of tools. They went in, they invested in with different things. Expectations were different, and they wanted different things out of it. As maturity has grown, every organization wants to start seeing that big picture. What are they gaining by their automation initiatives? And this is where the enterprise level initiative becomes very important. I won't call it enterprise level automation needs to uproot everything which is there and create a new one, but it's more about ensuring that you are able to drive automation and the value delivered from automation in an end-to-end basis. Leverage your existing investments, leverage your data, because that's the most critical part today, and help deliver value, which is not just about a task automation or a process automation, but deliver a business outcome. So if I pick up enterprise automation fabric as an example, we focus on 5 key outcomes which we wanted enterprise automation fabric to deliver to its customers. First and foremost was enablement of a frictionless business operation. Now, Vaibhav alluded to the fact that it's no longer sufficient that your IT processes are automated. What we want to see is that how are my business processes running? Your applications, infrastructure layer, they're all very critical. But at the end of the day, they are part of a bigger process, which is about delivering service to end customer, and that is a business value. If the volume of invoices handled in an hour was X, is it going below X? And if it is there, can I, in near real time, figure out is something going wrong? What needs to be done? Because I need to provide a frictionless business operation, which is the key thing. The second aspect which EF tries to address is regarding the end users. A lot of users of the platform, I'm talking of platform, not the end customer. So employee experience is very critical today because, again, the current generation which is there, if they do not see value, if they're not excited by what is being done, they do not want to do repetitive, mundane jobs. So how can an enterprise platform either totally take away mundane jobs from their plate or enable them, augment their capabilities to deliver it better? And that's a critical part of it. So enhancement of employee experience was something which was very high on our priority list. The third focus area was delivering frictionless enterprise IT. Now, again, this is something which we've been doing day in, day out. In your first slide, you saw more than 80% of the focus on automation has been in the IT space, but that's pretty much because that's the foundation on which a lot of things run. So to ensure that there's a surprise-free operation which is going on, you have applications, infrastructures running seamlessly, high availability, high agility, and what you need. And finally, improvement of visibility across business and IT. Now, this is very critical because, again, being reactive is not good enough. Even if we are able to resolve things very quickly, I think what the market expects is that you should be able to proactively identify potential issues. Can we really, through the detailed observability, visibility, are able to figure out when a potential outage could be expected or impact on performance is there? Can we take preemptive actions to resolve them and end up with a situation where an end user never has to raise an incident? So that's the target, and that is where things like AI ops and all become very powerful. And all this enabled through automation. Automation is an important part of the whole thing we're talking of, but automation, if I may say, is the final arm, execution arm of everything. The primary value is about the data, about analytics, about the understanding of what's going on, putting it in context, and finally ensuring that the automation arm is able to execute the last mile which you need to do. So these are the 5 key things from EF perspective we've been looking at. Maybe if I can request Eric, if you'd like to add anything to that.
Well, I think you summarized it very, very well, Sonal. So the cornerstone, as you mentioned, and as we discussed already, are really the observability. There's no efficiency in an automation framework if you are missing some skill, something coming from the ground. Looks obvious, but good to remind, and we need to have a proper AI ops capability, which is coming from the observability. That's where the effort has been put in the last 18 months, and where we will continue. Of course, and we talked a lot about Gen AI, the second pillar is really the data. There will never ever be Gen AI efficient without a proper management of the data. So just to summarize what you say, Sonal, fully agree, observability, AI ops, and data and analytics are the cornerstone of a proper automation platform.
Thanks, Eric. Over to you, Anish.
Yeah. So, I mean, we have been talking about AI, Gen AI, and we also saw that AI is one of the major drivers, right? Sonal, can I request you to throw some more light on the role that AI ML, including generative AI, plays in the intelligent automation, enterprise automation fabric?
Sure. So again, picking up on what Eric also reconfirmed just ahead, a lot of from Capgemini perspective, our approach to enterprise automation fabric, I would say, is fairly focused upon what we can do with the underlying data. Again, I repeat, just for clarity, automation is critical, but automation is just the final execution arm. The value comes in if we are able to make sense of the data around it, contextualize it, identify it, and at the end of the day, utilize the data to drive things in an autonomous manner, analyze how the performance is, identify any anomalous behavior in the environment. And when I say anomalous behavior, we are not just talking about an IT parameter, because where I started from, enabling frictionless business operation. So what we try to do is try to link business KPIs and map them to the services on which enable those business KPIs. As those particular services are again mapped down to the underlying application and infrastructure. So the critical part is how we use AI ML to identify what a normal behavior looks like, and then identify those observations where an anomalous behavior comes in, and we are able to autonomously identify a problem and wherever possible, try and have an autonomous resolution. Now, moving further, I would say we've been using the traditional AI solutions for everything from knowledge management to identification of resolutions, identification of anomalous behavior, even problem management. But the next step we're heading towards is what generative AI is enabling for us. For that, maybe I request Jerome if you could probably throw some light about the kind of Gen AI initiatives we're trying to see to improve the overall service delivery.
Yeah, so from a Gen AI standpoint, what we observe and what is commonly observed across the world, I would say, is that Gen AI is there to augment all the current processes, activities, and tasks that we are doing. So what is important for us as an evolution also of the enterprise automation fabric is to enhance it with all the Gen AI capabilities so that employees, you were talking about the enhancement of employee experience, is even better than before, because the generative AI power can enable them to do tasks faster and to an extent they were not able to do before. So for us, generative AI is of course an initiative which we are running with a high priority, and we are in the process of building some ADM AI agent on the application development management activity to enable our users to be augmented in their incident management activities, in their problem management, and many others activities. And we are also targeting to develop what we call an ADM copilot that could be added to the platform in order to help our employees and our customers ultimately to perform new tasks at a faster pace.
Thanks, Jerome. So Anish, I know Jerome gave a very good view about where we are heading. Though again, there are certain things which are very unique from an ADM perspective where we have been focusing. The approach from Gen AI for us is also across the infrastructure services and the broader offerings of EAF. Maybe if I can very briefly go to Eric to maybe just touch upon some of the generative AI initiatives to address the service delivery from an infrastructure perspective.
Sure. Yeah.
So we have a similar roadmap and the converged roadmap, with Jerome and the team. So what we try to do is really to be more efficient in our operation to deliver value to the customer. That's really the purpose of GenAI. So typically what we intend to do is to have sort of the infrastructure copilot, if you want, which is the equivalent with some commonality of what Jerome described, to ensure that regardless of where we are in the chain, from development to till the operation, we are using the same assets, we are using the same principle and the same processes. So the purpose is absolutely to be capable to propose to our customers something which is really frictionless at the first sense of the word, which is wherever you are positioned in the development chain or the usage or your apps, you will use GenAI, and GenAI will simplify and improve your daily life.
Thanks, Eric. Over to you, Anish.
Great. Thanks everyone for sharing your thoughts. Now that we understand the importance of enterprise automation, question to you, Vaibhav. Can you help enterprises understand some of the considerations for a successful adoption of such a solution?
Yeah, thanks, Anish. So again, when it comes to considerations, or basically how should you go about your enterprise automation journey, I think the first thing I'll say is you don't need to start from scratch, right? So you already have a lot of things in place, right? So it's just probably some adjustments, some refinements, some changes, some rethinking which is needed to go for this approach based on enterprise automation. Again, you can see a typical path here, which is actually true for most technologies. But when I talk about enterprise automation adoption, especially the initial few steps which you see here are more strategic in nature. So I think if you can rethink, some of those steps, the rest of these could take care of themselves. So I'll talk about some of them. The first one around securing management buy-in, right? So I think that's again very critical because that's where this could make or break. The senior management, the top management, they need to be aligned about the benefits of enterprise automation vis-a-vis the traditional siloed automation. So that's the first thing you need to get in place. Secondly, around the entire COE structure or bringing these IT and business stakeholders together. So I think that is extremely important. Like I said earlier, while you may have your existing COEs in place, it makes sense to either have common steering teams or COEs who can now cater to this new reality where business process and IT automation needs to come together, right from conceptualization or objective setting to execution to the final value realization. So all those need to come in place. So that's where having a combined COE makes sense. The COE is also important for a lot of governance and change management activities, right? Otherwise, a lot of these initiatives, as they get federated, they may go haywire. So we need a centralized team to be able to govern and drive internal change management within the organization. Third, and probably the most important aspect I want to talk about is this entire pipeline development, or basically running this as a typical automation factory, which again you might be doing in your siloed business process and IT initiatives also. But here, you could consider, which are the right candidates to start enterprise automation, because suddenly that shift will not happen, right? So you'll not suddenly start applying enterprise automation or bringing together business process and IT automation everywhere. So a good place to start would be, where one of these are already in place, right? So maybe certain divisions, certain areas where these are already in place, or basically where the business and IT teams are already connected in some way. So those are probably good areas to start, or maybe the areas which are more mature in terms of where automation adoption. They started maybe 5-6 years back and they have reached a certain level. So now they are mature enough to adopt enterprise automation. So those could be some of the criteria. which you can consider when you think about pipeline development or use case or business case assessment, and then take it from there, slowly implement it throughout the organization. The last thing which I want to talk about here is around the provider or the platform selection. Again, very important. And I talked about this entire provider sprawl earlier, right? Where a lot of enterprises are now looking at provider consolidation. So it's important for you to consider the right provider or the right set of providers. Again, I'm not saying that you should just have one provider or one platform. Of course, that's not going to be a reality. But even if there are multiple providers or platforms, you need to be very conscious about who you are choosing. Does the provider have the capability to link business process and IT automation? Do they have underlying data layer or data fabric to connect or build on the top of that? So those kind of considerations you can have when you think about providers and platforms from an enterprise automation standpoint. Again, you don't need to do something which is very different. Just evaluate your existing list of platforms and providers and apply some of these principles to see who could help you on your journey on enterprise automation. Yeah, so that's what I can share. I think the remaining steps are more tactical and they will take care of themselves. Anish, back to you.
Great. So I think one of the critical steps that Vaibhav mentioned, it was process pipeline development, right? So I wanted to understand from Sonal, like what critical factors, according to you, should the enterprises consider before deciding which processes to automate via enterprise automation? And along the same lines, and what kind of services do you offer to empower enterprises?
So, Anish, when we look at process for automation, one thing which I would say stands out clearly is we look at a process which is an optimized process ideally, because automating for the sake of automating a process, which itself is inefficient, is not the best solution we recommend for our clients. So it's very important to first have a look at it. Capgemini has an approach, what we call ESOAR. It's ESOAR. Eliminate, standardize, optimize, robotize, and automate. The focus is, if we go through this process, we are looking at a sustainable automation, something which will keep providing value over a period of time. So by and large, we try to implement this framework. It's not necessarily that everywhere you have to follow it, but our experience shows that as long as we have done that, we end up delivering a solution for the client which actually delivers value on an ongoing basis, and we don't face much of an issue. The second part is we also need to see the criticality of processes. As we discussed earlier in the call, cost saving is an important part of it, but the end customer experience is probably today one of the biggest thing which comes across. You may have a low volume process, but again, if that gives a differentiated service to the customer who comes over there, yes, we recommend prioritizing those things so that the end customer sees the value and sees a differentiated level of service from our clients. From a technology perspective, we have also used AI significantly to identify the underlying volume of work which comes our way, analyzing what kind of incidents are coming, what kind of service requests are coming, what kind of client queries are coming. And depending on the nature of queries, our models are able to recommend the best candidates for automation, because automation, again, is not a one-time, I would say, activity. It's an ongoing journey. You keep enhancing the coverage of automation as you move forward. And to keep it going, it requires data to drive that particular journey. Obviously, you prioritize certain things. As I said, there are different things which you focus upon to prioritize. But by and large, we have an underlying solution within Enterprise Automation Fabric as well, which keeps doing an ongoing automation candidacy assessment and keeps recommending, so that depending on the prioritization of the team, your overall estate, which has to be covered under automation, keeps growing as you move forward, delivering enhanced value. Apart from that, there are clients who also come with some specific needs. Maybe if I could request Gary to share, because Gary deals with the clients directly. Gary, what kind of requests do you see from the client perspective if you like to add something over here?
Yeah, the thing is, of course, as every client is different, and the way that we architect the services that we deliver to them has to be relevant to the context that they provide. We bring with our services a lot of experience of the different markets, the different industry sectors, and that really underpins then the start of the journey that we take customers on. Some of the things that can cause some challenges are around specific security requirements or technology requirements. But again, with the experience that we have, we can build on them and ensure that the fabric-based approach is really tailored into the estate of the organization that we're working with, and make sure that we're aligned to their own enterprise IT estate, and it delivers the outcomes that we start off identifying at the beginning of the process, and then we continue to measure through by the end of the process.
Thanks, Gary.
In many instances, we see that enterprises are stuck beyond low-hanging fruits or are unable to realize value beyond a certain point, right? So Sonal, I wanted to understand, how do you enable enterprises to achieve scale through Enterprise Automation Fabric?
Yeah. So again, I think I'll probably go back to refer back to the previous point which we mentioned. In terms of driving value, it's important to identify which are the critical processes which are making an impact to the final service delivery. And that is where our data analytics layer at the bottom helps us recommend and identify those kind of processes. Now, when we talk of driving automation beyond a certain thing, one thing which we have seen over the last period of time is our ability to help our clients, not just in offering a platform, but also helping them in terms of, I would say, a low-code mechanism of creating new use cases depending on the needs. I think that's something which makes it easier to adopt. Many times we say that when you talk of a platform is something which is a very powerful engine you have given, but someone probably needs to utilize it, have a use case to utilize it. If you don't identify use cases, the value won't come through. So within our organization, picking up on one of the things which Weber mentioned earlier, we augment our services through some centers of excellence, one of the key amongst them being the automation COE. For them, the important part is based on various industries, based on various business processes. We have created a significantly large catalog of use cases which we have seen work well across our client base, deliver value. And many times we have seen that when we go to a customer, talk to them about something similar being done in their industry, I think the adoption rate is much higher as against going purely from, if I may say, an effort saving perspective or a cost saving perspective. So if we know that in a retail sector, it's process A or process B, we have seen clients doing and deliver significant value, and that use case is there in our repository, we try to present it and help our customer. At the end of the day, for me, if I may say, as a personal interest, personal KPI, being a product owner, the success of product is only when the customer gets full benefit out of it. We are not into the business of selling product and just living on the license revenue out of it, because that's not Capgemini model. But for me, the success of my platform is based on the value which comes across. And I think that in a way is a great KPI to have, because that ensures that we are invested in all the clients we work with, and we bring in our best practices, services, catalogs, so that we don't just stop at beyond the lower hanging fruits, but help our customer have a co-creation journey to ensure that they are deriving the right value they can expect from the platform.
Understood. Now, a major challenge we talked about earlier was the high total cost of ownership, right, of siloed automation solutions. Now, so I'm curious to understand, can this roadblock be minimized through the adoption of enterprise automation fabric?
I think an important point I would like to pick up on this. For us, when we called our solution as Enterprise Automation Fabric, there was a key reason to call it a fabric. EF is not a big monolithic platform. We never envisioned it as a big monolithic platform. We envisioned it as something which weaves across, which brings together various capabilities in a seamless manner, utilizes data, complements capabilities across various functionalities, and delivers value. One thing which actually led into this architecture model for us was the fact that we realized many of the customers had already invested a lot in different aspects of their automation journey. So EF enables us to leverage clients' existing investments, integrate them with the broader EF solution, and still provide the value which we commit to the customer. I'll take an example. EF has a very powerful AI ops solution of its own. But if a customer has already invested in an AI ops solution from vendor A or vendor B, they don't need to replace it. We simply can integrate with it, utilize the capability of the existing investments, and still deliver that end-to-end value, the business KPI measurement, and the whole thing which we talked about, using their existing investments. This ensures that we are not talking of duplicating any investments or probably writing off any old investments. This, in a way, helps from an overall cost of ownership. The second part, if I may say, is from EF, our focus has been more on providing EF as a service rather than dedicated large platform. Again, I would use the term which has to be deployed in the client environment, because a cloud-based service, you subscribe for your needs, you utilize based on your needs. Overall, we have seen has helped us in terms of reducing the overall TCO. But by and large, I would like to close on that from the perspective that it's a measurement of value and showcasing the customer as to what value we are delivering. I think that is the most critical part of it, because there are business processes which, if I may say, if I had to measure the cost versus the cost saving, do they create a great NX benefit? Not all of those use cases, but there are critical processes which actually, when you automate them, they make a huge difference to the end customer experience, which today is much more valuable. So overall, reduce the cost, utilize the existing investments, and finally deliver value which actually can be justified against what we're delivering to the customer.
That must be really reassuring for enterprises. All right, so now let's jump to a couple of questions which I believe are taking center stage in everyone's mind, right? Now, the first one is, what are some of the major business benefits enabled through Enterprise Automation Fabric?
Okay, so I think from a business benefit perspective, as we have been talking about, that's been primary focus. We have great case studies around it. Maybe let's address this by picking up some of the real use cases, real cases where we have worked with our clients. So I think the case study you see in front of you is for a major international airport. I will request Eric if you could possibly throw some light on what is the problem statement and how Enterprise Automation Fabric could help the client.
Thanks, Sonal. So basically, I think this one is a perfect example of moving from IT to business. An airport request to have AI ops for things which are totally out of the pure IT world. So we have talked with the business representative, the IT representative, and finding a solution which is, I would say, very accurate in terms of IT, but the next step to the business value for our customer. Typically, when I will take a very simple example, when a storm is forecasted in an airport, it's not only IT which will be impacted. You have the snow on the tracks, you have everything, and you need to organize. So here, what we try to do with EF and all the components, okay, that the customer could select or not, is to leverage all the capabilities from IT to business to be proactive and to be reactive if you need to be reactive. So really, reduction of the IT burden and the first step to the real business monitoring your whatever the name behind, the business value that we can deliver to the customer. So that's a perfect example. And as you, Sonal, mentioned, you could imagine that such airports are already very, very equipped in terms of tools. So the purpose is also to be not coming as a one-size-fits-all, but to be flexible, to adopt some elements which are coming from the customer and which are better coming from the customer. Management of an airport is not a Capgemini business. So we inherit components which are best of the breed and that we integrate in our automation fabric.
Great.
Thanks, Eric.
Yeah, I think, and like I said, I mean, there are two questions which I think would be in everyone's mind. The next one would be an even more important question, which is how can enterprises measure the ROI and overall success of their automation initiatives?
Yeah. So towards that, I think it's reassuring when Weber said at the start, when he was defining the requirements of enterprise automation, to say that it's the data analytics and the capability to use that data, which probably is critical. Thankfully, in Enterprise Automation Fabric, we have a very strong data management layer, which is able to link up and identify as to what are the areas where Enterprise Automation Fabric is being used, what is the usage, what is the impact, how we can actually quantify the benefits for our clients. It's no longer sufficient to say that, oh, by the way, I reduced probably your mean time to resolve for an incident from X to Y, but it's just that what is the final impact out of it? So, and I think that is the measurement which we try to focus upon as to how, if I may say, interruption-free was your IT environment over a period of time as compared to the steady state earlier. If you are trying to get in a new product or launch a new product, how agile is the new environment? How quickly were your service requests resolved? And many times when we talk about intelligent automation, I think a critical thing, and I find it something which is probably the simplest of the use case examples, but the way, if I may say, we differentiate the usage of data against the traditional automation is, for me, if a vendor is to be onboarded and the vendor onboarding request has come in, depending on the SLA, it could take you up till probably 24 to 48 hours before that vendor is onboarded into their systems and you can start dealing with the vendor. On the other hand, by using the data, by using the underlying model, if you're able to identify what needs to be done, does it qualify for certain thing, and you can have the vendor up and running in your system in the next 30 minutes or 60 minutes, you are starting to do business with someone in 60 minutes, which is not about saving that 10 minutes or 15 minutes of someone manually entering the vendor, but it's about making that business transaction come up by, say, 48 hours, which is probably a lot more of a value as compared to the savings of 10 minutes around it. So, and we try to measure those things and bring it out as a part of report. On the platform, we have a very strong data layer, as I said, but maybe to touch upon maybe one of the customer who used to have an issue with significant downtimes and probably where they had a business interruption and how we could probably help them out. Maybe I'll request Gary to probably give an overview of that, and Gary, I can add up if you want something later.
Okay, yeah, so it's a very interesting topic, and Sonal already touched on a couple of examples. This client is a very large global consumer electronics company, and as you can imagine, within the context of an enterprise automation engagement, there are many different use cases and many different scenarios that we can engage. In this particular one, what we were looking to do, as it says in the heading, is to maintain that or to enhance business continuity and to deliver smooth operations. It really comes back to something we've probably not touched on a lot, but the services that we deliver, are enabled by EAF to allow us to help customers with business continuity and smooth operations. In this particular customer, in order to get us to that end point, we were starting to use tools to do more monitoring. Yeah, the data layer that both Eric and Sonal have talked about needs filling up. And in order to do that, it's important to use the right monitoring tools. Yeah, but what tends to happen with the monitoring tools, you start to get lots of alerts. That creates lots of noise. And so it started to create incident prevention challenges and problems in particular business processes. Moving to the solution, yeah, because I think the business needs are quite clear there. It became very obvious that a single dashboard with event and alert correlation delivered through EAF AI Ops solution was needed in order to simplify the data that was coming through and really to provide what we'd call insights, yeah, which ultimately empowered and helped the people who were supporting this client to be more effective, triaging situations before they became problems to the customer, and ultimately, not self-healing, but being more proactive and putting in place a platform for self-heal. So the benefits are quite significant. Yeah. Not only were we able to ensure more business continuity and smooth operations, which is the outcome, but all the alert information then becomes significant as an input to further proactive process improvement and to increase then that continuity and to deliver further more smoother operations. So there's a positive feedback loop here from the creation of the alert through the effective management through an AI platform, an AI ops platform into the more efficient business processes. A lot more to talk about this one, but I think for the purpose of keeping succinct, probably good for now.
Thanks, Gary.
Okay, thank you, Gary. So this brings us to the end of the session. So I want to thank all our esteemed panelists for sharing your views. And I want to also thank all our listeners and viewers for sparing your time for this. Hope this is useful the next time you're thinking about anything related to automation. Thank you, everyone.